Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music, and we've been talking about modes, and I guess most specifically, the sort of chordal relationships that exist within modes. But today I want to take a look at the nuts and bolts of the scales and talk about the names of them and about how each mode has kind of a characteristic sound, where that sound comes from, how we can use it. I've got 6 examples, so let's dive in. Well, first of all, if this is the second or third video of mine you've seen and you're getting something out of the channel and you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button now. We've got a community here of composers, songwriters, producers who are using music theory to further their own aims musically, right? Who have a need to understand the nuts and bolts of chords, melodies, rhythms, and to inquire into their own music, their own tastes, their own musical vision, their own artistry, in a way that has some, I guess I would just say, thoughtful underpinnings, right? We need language to talk and think about that, but this isn't music theory in an academic way. Rather, it's just something that we're trying to do in order to get better at what we're already doing, right? I hope this is music theory for everyone. Well, to that end, we're tackling modes. And of course, you know, the modes are taught in a number of different ways. And I've got at least one video that says, hey, the way we were teaching modes isn't the best way to think of it. Think of it this way. I'm going to touch on that briefly, but let's do a really quick review before we get into our 6 fairly easy examples. All right, here we go. I guess the first thing you've got to keep in mind is that every major scale is a formula of whole and half steps. And that formula could be described like this. Whole step between those 2 notes. Whole step, and then a half step. And it's very obvious in the key of C. There's no black key in between those 2. The whole formula is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. I'll play all of the notes, and you can look down at the bottom of the screen and see that my computer program, I use the Chordy app to do all this analysis in real time, is naming this C Ionian. Ionian. It's a Greek word that is used to describe the major scale. Now, if I use that same formula, if I grab all of these notes and just shift over a step, I'm going to get what my computer accurately analyzes as D Dorian. D Dorian. It's the same notes, but it's a scale rather from D to D. And as a result, we've got a different formula. We've got whole step, half step. It's a minor third. Whole step, whole step, whole step, a half step here, and then another whole step to get through to the end. Each of these positions within the regular old diatonic C major scale has a Greek name. The 3rd step of the scale is Phrygian. And then the 4th step of the scale, we call it the Lydian. Each of these has a quality as well. The Phrygian had a minor third. The Lydian has a major third and a raised 4th degree that leads to the 5th. The Mixolydian mode, built on the 5th step of a major scale, has a really wonderful quality because it has a major 1 chord and a major 4, but it's also got a major flat 7 chord, so it's great for rock and roll. Right? Love that. Now, if we go to the 6th step of the scale, we've got the Aeolian mode. I'll put the A on the top. And it's what we call natural minor. It's the relative minor of C. The 7th step of the scale is a perhaps less known or less used mode, the Locrian mode. We almost always play it with some alterations. Locrian sharp 2 is the one that we kind of use the most often. And then we're home again. If I kept going up, I'd be back at C. There are 7 modes, one for each step of the major scale. Now, another way to think about this, and I actually believe this is a better way to learn our modes, is to really let your ear identify how they differ from the regular major scale. I'll play all of them at once. That's the C Ionian. And then if I wanted to go to C Dorian, 2 of those notes get flat. If I want to go to C Phrygian, 4 of those notes are flat. If I want to go to C Lydian, suddenly the F becomes raised as sharp. C Mixolydian has a flat 7. You see where I'm going here, right? C Aeolian is just the natural minor. And then finally, I'm at the Locrian mode. It's like a D-flat major scale. And as we look at these, there it is right there. So we've got the Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian mode. And you can see how each of those individual notes has to shift in order to accommodate the scale. Now, I don't really like thinking of it this way. I like thinking of it in terms of, I guess you might say, the circle of fifths. That might be one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is relative brightnesses. Now, if I think about relative brightnesses, I think the Lydian scale is the brightest. And then the regular old Ionian comes next. Now we're going to gradually lower notes. Basically, what I did here was I lowered the F sharp to F. Now I'm going to lower the B to B flat, and I'll get C Mixolydian. Now I'm going to lower the E to E flat, and I'll get C Dorian. See where this is going? It's so interesting to me. Now I'm going to lower the A to the A flat. That's C Aeolian. It's the relative minor of E flat. It's a really normal sounding sort of scale. And then what have we got left? The D comes down here. That's another possibility. So we've got the Phrygian mode next. It's like an A flat major scale from C to C. And then finally, there's only one note left. There's C Locrian. I wound up lowering a bunch of notes, right? It's really obvious. See, those notes there go down. It's so cool. It's kind of weirdly magical. If you know all 12 major scales, actually there are more than 12, aren't there? There are 15 because of spellings. The modes of each of those become accessible to you. I want to go back and look at my examples, but we're going to have to stop along the way because each mode has its own unique signature sound and to some degree utility and also sort of historical context. Is this going to be a long video? It'll hopefully be only as long as it needs to be. Well, I promised you that I would start with what I think of as the brightest of the modes. This is the mode, the Lydian mode, that has the raised 4th step. You can hear it here. This is an F Lydian sound. It's going to use all the white keys. And when I do a little pattern on that, it's so purty, right? Now, for my example, I actually shifted up from F Lydian to G Lydian. So I get 2 very bright sounds side by side. I went from the sort of F Lydian sound to the G Lydian sound. And it's, as a result, just a very bright sort of weirdly sort of stunning sound. So there's that F Lydian. Now G, there's the C sharp. This is an evocative cinematic sound. And that raised 4th degree has a quality that's really useful. So if I'm Leonard Bernstein, I say Maria, that yearning, raised 4th degree going to the 5th degree, is the signature sound of the Lydian scale, the mode, and to some degree, the choral world as well. Because if I play C major and then add a raised 4, this is a kind of a jazz major sound, right? sort of a beautiful sound. And you know, the fourth degree resolving to the major third is a plagal soft cadence, but that raised fourth degree up to the fifth hints at what we call an authentic cadence to G. So we're pushing to that G, the fifth of the chord, and we get, as a result, a really strong sense of yearning and, I think, great beauty. It's wonderful for cinematic music. Oh, I love the terrain of this sound, the collective sound of the Lydian mode. Listen, let's go on. I doubt much needs to be said about the major mode, the Ionian mode. But the 5-1, the dominant chord on the fifth, the tritone resolving to 1, is the signature sound of the Ionian mode. And if I use the word dominant, you'll know exactly what I mean. A dominant chord has a tritone and it wants to resolve, and it dominates the scale. I think one of the greatest uses of modal harmony, modal melody, is that it weakens that tonic-dominant relationship. And what I've done here is I've tried to soften it some, but it's still very present. You feel the strong push towards C, towards 1. Let's go on. So as we move forward in our levels of brightness, we've gone from Lydian to Ionian, the regular major scale. Now we're going to take the 7th step of a major scale and lower it a half step. Now, here I am in F again, and we've got E flat instead of an E. So here's my F Mixolydian. And what I love about the Mixolydian scale is that it's very rocky. And it's got great chords. That is to say, that flat 7 chord, we call the backdoor cadence, very strong. And I just love it here against an F pedal tone just in the bass. And that's kind of a 70s sort of sound, I think. So I'm using the 4 chord, the 1 chord, the flat 7 chord. If you talk to a jazz musician or theorist, they'll say, you know, the Mixolydian mode is the scale, the mode that you should use when soloing over a dominant chord. And the reason for that, of course, is that flat 7th step. And if you look at like the notes that are in the chord or in the scale, you can see why. Here's my F7 chord, and here's my sort of F Mixolydian scale. It doesn't actually really go very far to satisfying modern jazz musicians, however, I will just say that. But it is a way to start. And if you want a simple 7-note scale to give you a little more expansion, if you want to say, I need to step away from my blues scale, the next step is undoubtedly the Mixolydian mode, or our next example, the Dorian mode. All right, we've been lowering things. Now we're going to lower the 3rd. So when we lower the 3rd, we get this sound here. And we're going to show you in D because it's kind of the easiest one to think about. D minor 7, of course, has a minor 3rd and a minor 7th. But here's what makes the Dorian mode so interesting. This note right here. Because a regular old D minor is this. There's a B flat in there. And I'm going to take it and kind of leave it where it was from the Mixolydian. So now I've got this beautiful, bright 6th step. Now the Dorian mode is interesting to me because look at this formula. Whole step, half step, whole, 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 half, whole. It's the same going down. Whole step, half step, whole, 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 half, whole. It is a symmetrical scale, and actually it's very easy to see it's symmetrical. It's fascinating to me. It's a whole other video, but we're going to wait on that. So listen to this great Dorian sound. Now, beautiful. The Dorian mode is the one that crops up, I think, the most usefully in improvisational music, especially in the post-bop jazz era. We see tunes from Coltrane, Miles, Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, and numerous other composers exploiting this minor sound and the kind of glowing sort of harmony that we get out of the Dorian mode. In fact, the term modal music for contemporary jazz has been used to describe a whole collection of sort of post-bop and contemporary harmonic practice that doesn't rely on tonic-dominant relationships, but rather kind of shifts from key center to key center. It gives you like a series of terrains that you can explore so that the tonic-dominant relationships are weakened, but you can melodically and to some degree harmonically kind of navigate around these areas. They're sort of like musical spaces as much as anything else. Let's go on to just the regular old Aeolian mode, the minor mode. It's a beauty. And here we are in E minor. And in the Aeolian mode, traditionally, we've got a minor 1 chord, a minor 4, and minor 5. And it has a kind of a soft, very sad beauty, I think. Here, just well-voiced versions of those chords in the right hand, counterpoint, moving bass line. So the bass line almost becomes the melody. Well, we've got only one more example, but really we have 2 more modes. Our last mode is going to be the Phrygian mode, and I just put the Locrian mode aside, and it's because I guess it's problematic in its use because it has a weird fifth. Say if I'm in B Locrian, the root of that scale and the fifth of it are a tritone apart. And it's just very difficult to use that scale without suggesting a dominant chord quality of some kind or other. Now, that is not to say that the Locrian mode, especially the Locrian raised 2, isn't super useful. All right, let's dial it back and go to the Phrygian mode. Now, we've been lowering things, and now we lower the second degree. So here's an example of E Phrygian, all white keys, and you can see that a regular old, E natural minor scale would be this. I'm going to take that second degree and lower it. But our example is G Phrygian, and those 3 chords right there, that's a major chord on flat 3, major chord on flat 2, and then a minor chord on 1, is very often paired with what we call the Phrygian major, where the 1 chord becomes major, that B natural. In fact, it's a very, I guess I'll say Spanish or Andalusian sound, right? So I've actually used that sound in this example. We'll hear the minor version like this. A couple of major chords, and this time we'll have 3 major chords, G major. It's a 2 against 3 Philip Glass rhythm, isn't it? There's something really uplifting about that major 1 chord when we get there. Well, each of the conventional major modes has an identity. And one way to think about their identities is to ask, is the third major or minor? And another way, and really they act in combination, is to examine where the half steps are in the scale. Because the major scale is a formula of whole and half steps, and we're moving around that layout to create the conventional modern modes that we talk about, we're creating, you'd say, I think of it as like kinks in the stream of conventional melody. Our ears are trained to listen for tritones, for half steps, suggesting authentic cadences. And when those half steps fall in unusual or surprising places, we have an emotional response to that. That emotional response is the material that we work with when we work with modal music. And modal scales, especially with melody. And then when we take it a little bit further into terrain-based music, like what I like to write, the actual sort of harmonic language that we use, the terrains as we play 3 and 4 and 5 note chords or voice strings or something like that within that, give us a ambiguous, mysterious, and sometimes really kind of magical set of sounds. You have to experiment with this, and everyone has different, I guess I would say, responses to it and opinions. And of course, that's the beauty of it, isn't it, right? Because we're all different. We're all going to hear these things differently. Meanwhile, we've done enough for today, right? And I hope it's been useful. So like and subscribe like I asked you at the top of the video. I'll see you next time.